A year had passed since they'd put an end to the demonic invasion at Laminster. A year had passed since Franziska severed her binding to the Cinder Plains, or so she thought, for her dreams were invaded by the visage of the Cinder Kings she indirectly served, plaguing visions of an upward hierarchy she had no idea existed, visions of those she led to slaughter that night in the village. Her sleep brought terror, her waking hours brought only regret, and questions of whether or not she'd really freed herself from the infernal binding magic, whether that empty feeling inside her was her conscience berating her for what she did, or if it was where her soul used to be. Maybe she didn't free herself after all. Maybe her soul still hung suspended in the fiery skies of that cursed realm. For a year, she kept it a secret from the most scrutinizing eyes on the continent. Her new traveling companion and teacher in the ways of swordsmanship and holy magics, Anya of Sunderstone. Together, they fought the tides of evil where they could, destroying a few ancient demons here, making examples of wicked mortal men there. All the while, Anya welcomingly taught Franziska clerical practice, breathing new magic into the half-elf with the goddess Alexia's warm sunlight. Warm sunlight that did well to remind her of the hole inside herself. Fran quickly came to the realization that this could be her second chance, to do good and get her soul back. Perhaps Alexia let her in as a test that if failed would damn the rest of her back to the Cinder Plane. So, to outrun the punishment she feared to come, she took to helping people and rebuilding lives ruined by all sorts of evils. Her travels eventually landed her in the city of Ostergard. Ready to solve whatever problems they had, she was the first out of the carriage. Ostergard was a rather developed bayside city under the control of the infamous Woodland Duke, Bridger Marin. Anya was hesitant to take work from the man behind several separatist skirmishes in the Midlands, but Fran vehemently insisted they hear him out. While Anya made her way back towards the city center to make contact with Marin, Fran stuck behind, instead going around to handfuls of town people to try to piece together a bigger story than what they came in with. After a bit of digging, it became clear that the people of Ostergard were weary of a shadow growing in the Black Forest. Talks of a ritual to resurrect a tyrant, a scorching wind sent across the land, quite a helping of doomsday, but the people seemed to believe it, as they all told Fran much of the same thing. Something was out there in the forest. Anya, in the meantime, had gained access to the town hall and Bridger Marin himself. She stepped into his office, closing the door behind herself and startling the Duke from a deep thought. He stood from his chair.
Welcome to Ostergard, Anya. I hope the carriage was comfortable. It was the best that I could muster in such short time.
It served well.
I trust we need no introductions. I know of your exploits, and I'm sure I'm not of as much import as our current issue.
What issue is that? You were vague in your letter.
Ah, yes. Apologies for that. I suppose I was, now that I think of it. A town under Ostergard control, Dalhurst, fell under some sort of attack the night before last. They've grown dark, and I've grown worried.
Why send for us? Ostergard is quite a power in this region. I'm sure you could put together some well-trained scouts.
The first groups of scouts we sent fell out of contact as well. While you may think it pertinent to send more, I'm walking a very thin line here.
Marin paused, turning momentarily to look out the window.
This town is afraid. Any more news of disappeared soldiers and it could destabilize everything. The last thing I want is broken spirits.
Anya shifted her gaze to the corner of the room. A lightly armored woman stood against the wall, seemingly splitting her attention between assessing Anya and waiting for orders from Marin. Bridger saw the eye contact between the two and spoke up.
That's Inspector Galois. She's to accompany you to Dalhurst.
I was to be plan A, but our good Duke didn't hesitate to cough up the extra stags once he heard the great Anya Sunbreaker was insincere.
Bridger absorbed the underhanded remark with a slight cock of his head before returning his eye to Anya.
Her guild here in the city has interests in Dalhurst as well. The extra sword poses no issue for you?
Anya simply shook her head.
Good.
The Duke then stepped over to a cupboard and retrieved a bag of coinage.
Your payment, ahead of time.
Chucking Anya the bag, he continued.
You're to travel to Dalhurst, perform a sweep, and if you see anything of concern, report it back to me. Anything.
He then paused and scratched his chin in concern.
If anything goes wrong, leave immediately. Return back here at once.
Understood. Be seeing you.
She then turned on heel to leave the room, finding Galois to have left many moments ago. She nodded and left the room, making her way down the stairs of the tower to regroup with Fran outside.
He didn't know very much.
Well, that's too bad. My little go around the town showed off a real sense of paranoia. In everyone.
Is that so?
Yeah, they all seem to think that there's some kind of ancient god king coming back to life in the forest, bent on burning down all of creation. I heard that a bunch of cultists swooped into the next town over and turned all the residents into mindless puppets. Or something like that.
There could be some truth to that. The townspeople may be more eager to share than the Duke. I feel I wasn't told everything.
They began making their way back to the carriage, which was ordered to wait for them at the gates while they spent their time in town.
Oh, by the way, was that lady in black a friend of ours? Looked like she was in a hurry.
She's coming too.
They paused for a moment, both ruminating on their shared mistrust of mercenaries. But, nevertheless, they eventually got out onto the road, the carriage embarking on its 2-day journey west. The forest thickened and thinned as they passed by patches dominated by the lumber guilds of the surrounding settlements. Eventually, Dalhurst rounded the corner of the winding road and sat before them. An apparently once bustling town, it now lay dormant on the hillside. No smoke from the chimneys, no light in the windows. Though Galwa had regrouped with them on the ride there, she'd once again left them behind on the final stretch, leaving an hour or so before the main carriage. Anya cast her gaze up to the neighboring mountain, a snow-capped titan stripped bare by logging efforts in the area. She sighed and prepared to exit the carriage.
Keep your thoughts focused, and your sword ready. You have your symbol?
Check.
The two of them stepped from the carriage, passing the driver already preparing for a long wait to get back on the road. Wasting no time, they made their way into town, keeping an eye out for any sign of survivors. The sun began to slide behind the horizon, their search becoming less and less fruitful. They only encountered numerous corpses, some in piles, some struck down where they stood to fight. After nearly 2 hours of scouring the town from end to end, their search for survivors turned up nil. But they made note of numerous signs of struggle, as well as large reptilian claw prints in the dirt, with rending marks across several surfaces. Their search was abruptly interrupted with a commotion from behind a nearby building. Swords were drawn and stances assumed immediately as Fran and Anya's gaze quickly shifted to the source. A moment passed, tense as they pondered. Could whatever have done this still be here? Another crash. They quickly ran towards the noise, stopping in their tracks as a form stumbled out from around the corner. His eyes met theirs before coughing up blood and tumbling forwards, clutching a large wound. Fran and Anya blinked, registering it before Galwa stepped into view, sheathing her sword.
A scout. Come back to ensure the job was done.
You're sure?
I'm sure of it. I tried to question him, but he came at me. I'm going to search for accomplices. Look him over for leads, will you?
Anya shot Fran a glance before gesturing to the body. Fran got down and began going over his belongings as Anya tagged along behind their new companion, coughing to get her attention.
So, did the extra hour turn up anything? You could have waited.
I needed a clean and quiet look around. You two aren't known for your light step.
And yet?
Galwa gave a smirk of recognition.
Nothing turned up that you haven't seen already. Whatever thing did this is gone from the area. But if my intuition is correct, I have a good idea who did this.
Before Galwa could fill Anya in anymore, Fran called them both over, having found an interesting marking on the man's back. He was tattooed in bright red ink with an unfamiliar symbol.
That's something. Haven't seen a rune like that before.
Yeah, it doesn't look like your everyday ink, huh? That's because it's not. It's our proof. We're done here.
Fran and Anya shared a tilted brow before the cleric spoke up.
What, just like that? 2 days on the road for a couple of hours search over a graveyard? Yeah, just like that. We very well could have been here days if they hadn't become sloppy and handed us the last piece of the puzzle.
What puzzle? Who are we up against here?
The Wormspine cultists. A self-proclaimed kingdom led by a man named Dalton. He started as no more a problem than your average bandit lord, but now he has a full-fledged army, ruling as some dragon king.
Marin pulled back from the desk, running his fingers through his hair, choosing his words carefully.
I've been waiting for his move, and this all but confirms his plans. You said you found traces of creatures in the town.
Claw marks. We think reptilian.
Galwa made a sort of I-told-you-so face at Marin, who in turn moved to face the new figure in the room, a half-elf introduced to Fran and Anya as Ira Penderson, representative from the neighboring kingdom of Alden. Ira sighed deeply, wringing his hands on his lap. I never thought he'd go so far.
Think, Ira. Dalhurst was one of Ostergard's...
The Duke paused, again carefully choosing his words.
My settlements. What have I been saying? The day will come when he grows bold enough to stretch his legs. My day has come. Alden's could be mere hours away.
Marin, You were right. I always thought you were being paranoid, but this is insanity. An entire town murdered.
I'm afraid so. There are no survivors. Evidence suggests they boxed them in at night and had a force of drakes there.
That's enough. I've heard enough. I'll speak to my circles. Alden won't sit by anymore. If what they say is true, and he really is looking to bring back a dragon, I can only hope we meet him with force fast enough.
As do I. This is a great act of courage, Ira. I hold no ill will against you for not believing me. All that matters is that we stand together. May your travel home be swift and safe.
Ira gave a solemn nod, gesturing to his guards to leave the room with him. The Duke watched them go before turning his attention back to Fran and Anya.
I'm offering a new job. Once Alden agrees to move with us on the pass, I want the two of you at the head. You could be valuable assets in our battle for this region.
Of course, sir. It'd be an honor to avenge your people. We'll be staying in town.
And with that, the two of them left the office, Anya almost dragging Fran out.
Well, he's lying.
Oh, good, so we're on the same page.
The two of them pulled each other into a quiet corner of the tower.
Dalton had nothing to do with Dalhurst.
I believe it was Marin's orders. He's trying to frame Dalton.
Yeah, and it's working! It's all smoke and mirrors, Annie. With the war down south fueling everyone's anxieties, no one would notice a power grab up north. Especially not against someone painted to be just another bandit leader. It feels like Marin's gonna try to get Alden under his banner and then... Well, I don't know, but it can't be good, right?
No, it can't. We must make haste to the pass. Get ahead of both armies and warn people.
And so make haste they did. Slipping out of town under cover of night, they nicked a pair of horses from the stables and rode out west.
You sure that they know? They could be useful to us still.
Yes, I'm certain. It's no matter, I only needed them for so long. Anya was a convenient occurrence with a voice that can sway many hearts. Her simply being there to witness has given credit to our story.
Ah, she could serve such a purpose in her death. Her and her little friend. When word spreads that the great Anya Sunbreaker and her company were slain by the Dragon King, we'd have a great many supporters flock to our cause.
Precisely. Few would question our motives after that.
He turned from looking out the window over the bay.
I want you to be the one to do it. Kill them in the chaos. Try to frame the cultists. Do I have your pledge?
Always.
Good. Now, I've received word that they left town not long ago. I can only assume they're going to warn the bastards of our approach. Mobilize our forces in a few hours. Start a forced march with the carriages. It'll take them 2 days to get there. We stay on their heels, give them no room to plan anything.
He sauntered back to his desk, taking a seat in the chair.
And if all goes well, Alden will be there when we arrive.
Fran and Anya made haste along the road, passing larger and larger camps of Ostar forces, which only helped to spur them on. They had to get to the pass, and after 2 days on the road and a number of hours in the hills of the Black Forest, the pine trees gave way to rock cliffs, which culminated in a large trench through the land. They'd reached Wormspine Pass. Creeping closer and closer, they began to hear the sounds of civilization, soon finding the source. Dozens of people living out of strikingly well put together yurts on the road through the pass, the walls of the trench, and any flat surface they could find. The pass had been completely converted into a small town under the governance of Dalton, now supporting not just the original kobolds, but humans, orcs, dwarves, and all in between. Fran and Anya garnered many concerned looks as they moved through the pass, towards the massive bridged fortress spanning the width of the trench. After they got a good ways into the community, a jeweled kobold draped in a great many fabrics approached them, in a manner revealing its age.
Greetings, Blade Sisters. We hope your journey here was a peaceful one. I can't wait your company.
Oh,
She held back a chuckle.
we, have incredibly urgent news for your king. You're all in a grave amount of danger.
The steward blinked a bit.
Oh, that's not good. We better hurry then. Come on.
The kobold found a new spring in his step and hurried up the scaffolding and stairs built into the walls of the trench, headed for the palace. Fran and Anya followed close behind, soon finding themselves in the main room of the palace. There he was. King Dalton stood at the edge of his open-air throne, looking out over the vast forest and mountain range in the distance. The steward spoke up.
Blade Sisters, Anya and Francisca, Your Highness.
The Blade Sisters, unsure of the customs of the pass, quickly knelt out of reverence. Dalton turned.
You needn't kneel. Not for me. Aegis, you can go now.
He looked to the draped kobold who quickly nodded and hobbled out of the room.
Sir, I'm sorry, but if you'll let me cut in just real quick, you probably only have a couple hours before both Alden and Ostergard come crashing through your door.
Is that so?
She's right. Duke Marin of Ostergard has framed you as responsible for the destruction of Dalhurst. He is on his way right now.
When my scouts told me something had happened there, I feared the worst, but we had no certainty it was him.
He's done well to cover his tracks, yes. Our condolences for the man you lost there. One of Marin's stabbed him through the back.
All my scouts returned accounted for. That wasn't one of mine.
Oh, of course, he was a plant! Poor guy probably had no idea he was sent there to die.
It's safe to assume the drakes that were let loose upon the town weren't yours either then?
We have no drakes near the pass. The closest native species belongs to the bay. Ostergard's bay.
Wait, nobody thought to look into that?
If all I can see about this situation is true, then the Duke successfully wove a story against us. Thus, everyone was too scared to look any closer.
Dalton turned to gaze out the window again.
In the end, the isolation I thought would protect my people from harm gave our enemies a way to paint whatever picture they wanted of us.
Oh, yeah, all pretty out there, too. I mean, come on, resurrecting a dragon? That's ridiculous.
Oh no, that part is almost true. It's a ritual, a rite of passage, if you will. We concluded the ceremony a few nights ago.
Well, I'm not seeing a dragon in sight, and the armies are still on their way, so yeah, I think we should hurry. Alden could be minutes from us.
And almost as if to reinforce her point, a sickening war horn blared from beneath them. Fran's heart sank. Anya gripped her hilt and stepped over to the door of the palace. Suddenly, it slammed open, a familiar face stepping through.
All here in one place. How lucky for me.
Galwa dropped the limp corpse of Dalton's steward to the floor, drawing her sword. Anya charged instinctively, drawing her weapon in kind. The two blades clashed, and Fran made her way over to Dalton, the king struggling to tear his tense gaze from his friend's now dead body.
All right, buddy. So where's that dragon? Please tell me you were being literal.
Anya and Galwa clashed blades down the steps, Anya working to push her opponent further back, down into the ensuing chaos in the trench. It quickly became apparent how outmatched and outnumbered the pass was. From the side of her gaze, Anya saw dozens trying to fight back, only to fall to the soldiers' blades. Eventually, their duel took them both down to the base of the steps. Anya began yelling for anyone who could hear to run through the pass to the north. A few stragglers began making their way through on her orders, escaping the conflict.
Dalton! Look at me, man! Your people are dying down there! Please tell me you have something!
I didn't think I'd ever have to do this.
Well, whatever it is you're planning, you have to go for it right now!
One quick strike. Enough to get them running and stay running.
Yeah, that's the spirit. What do you got?
Dalton nodded, quickly approaching the open wall behind his throne and overlooking the crowd of survivors cowering under his palace. He looked back at an expectant Fran before closing his eyes and throwing himself over the edge.
What?
Galwa was a perfect match. All of Anya's best strikes were parried, and her armor had developed numerous nearly fatal scrapes. She was beginning to tire, and Galwa knew it, becoming more ferocious in quick bursts, breaking through Anya's defense over and over again. Galwa saw it, an opening in the paladin's stance. She swept her leg out from under her, causing Anya to topple to the ground. Galwa quickly moved, bringing her blade down atop the weakened paladin before her motion was shaken by a loud, pained roar rippling through the trench walls. Anya used what little strength she had to redirect the wavered strike into the wood of her prosthetic before looking to see the source. There, soaring through the canyon, a dark mass of scales, claws, and rage. As Anya's eyes went wide with a newfound hope, Galwa's spirit sank. She let go of her blade and began to run, yelling at the soldiers to do the same.
Remember, Your Highness, just enough to get them running.
Dalton let out a low growl, his maw filling with bright blue embers before he swept his wings through the air and let forth a gout of flame that washed over the opening of the pass. Galwa braced with a growing scream, turning away from the flame and trying to cover herself with her cloak before the flames enveloped her. A dozen Alden soldiers fell to the flame before the Dragon King turned back to the sky, taking in the breadth of his domain. Suddenly, a glint of steel through the trees caught Fran's eye.
Look down there! It's Ostergard!
Dalton craned his neck, focusing on the Duke's forces. Making a determined march to the pass, they were unaware of the sudden turn of tide. With Alden cleared out, they had only Ostergard to shake free.
Let family crush their resolve.
Fran gripped tight as Dalton plummeted from the sky, wind cascading over his new reptilian form as he made a nosedive for the army. The Duke was at the head of the caravan, going over a map with one of his generals when a foot soldier exclaimed behind him, pointing fearfully at the sky. Merrin's eyes went wide with terror as he came to grips with what he was seeing. Dalton flattened out above the tree line, knocking many off their horses with the force of his beating wings before he opened his mouth once more and roared. Another pillar of flame raced across the tops of the carriages, destroying the largest ones and burning a handful of soldiers. Understanding his message to have gotten across, Dalton returned to the sky, arching back around for the pass, eventually coming to rest atop a rocky peak. Fran sighed deeply as she watched the rest of Ostergard turn tail and run, the Duke included. As the chaos in the pass settled, the survivors being led into the old catacombs of the pass, Dalton, Anya, and Fran looked out over the land from atop the peak.
Men are boneheaded. They'll be back, once they work up the courage to kill a dragon.
I suppose. But we'll be ready next time. No more second-guessing obvious dangers. You two were excellent today.
Oh, please. We got here late. And because of that, they still got the drop on you and your people suffered. I don't think that was very excellent.
But you came at all. You had every reason to believe us dangerous. We'd done nothing to prove otherwise, yet you still rode to our aid. It's comforting to know it's people like you protecting the lands. You're good people.
Huh. Didn't think of it like that, actually. Yeah. What's more heroic than heroism in the face of certain danger and catastrophic failure?
Not much, but don't make a habit of doing that. The world's not ready to see you gone just yet.
Clasping her hands over her chest, Fran grinned wide.
That is the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me, Annie.
Come on. We have people to help out down there.
So, with the opposing armies having been successfully repelled from Wormspine, the Blade Sisters helped where they could and eventually departed. Dalton, still shaken by the battle, quickly began debating the best way to assert him and his people into the world. His days of hiding them in the shadows were over. Fran and Anya returned to Ostergard and made the case to the people that Duke Merrin had ordered Dalhurst to death. Thanks to the added pressure of his subjects turning against him, the Duke ended up confessing everything to High Crown officials during a questioning for a completely different crime. He was summarily ousted by the Crown and sentenced to life in a frigid ice prison up north. So that all worked out. After that simmered down, Fran and Anya continued on, burning bright as beacons of justice. Fran, though not able to forget that fateful night, slowly adjusted to performing acts of goodness for their own sake, rather than to escape some sort of divine punishment. Those deeds were behind her, and the only thing she could do was move forward and ensure no one had to suffer the same fate. Dalton rebuilt what was lost, made shrines to the fallen, and expanded further outwards, officially founding the town of Wormspine. The truth about the people of that town soon came through, with public fear of the cryptic leader and devout followers ebbing over time. As for Galwal, well, when they were cleaning up from the chaos of the battle, not a single one of the bodies was hers. Unlike all the other charred forms of those Dalton scorched, she was nowhere to be found. But that's a story for a different time.